Sam Tarry is not a twerker, I don't think. He's Labour MP for Ilford South. Baroness Claire Fox is a non-affiliated peer and director of the Academy of Ideas think tank and author of the book I Find That Offensive. 0345 6060 973 if you'd like to ask our panel a question here on Cross Question.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
At 8 o'clock, a 14-year-old killed in yesterday's sword attack in northeast London has been described as a positive and gentle boy. Bancroft School says Daniel Anjurin was a true scholar and they're in profound shock and sorrow over his death. A man arrested over the attack in Hainault is being treated in hospital. Met Police Commissioner Samot Rowley has told LBC he wants to widen the use of stop and search to tackle knife crime.
Stop and search does work. It's been falling over for the last 2 or 3 years. Some of that, frankly, is about officer confidence. We're looking at ways to increase our stop and search, and we're making some announcements on that in the next couple of months.
LBC's been told the government plans to fill a plane with people when it begins to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda. The Home Office says it's begun detaining those due to leave in the next 9 to 11 weeks. The Chancellor says he doesn't know when the government will be able to afford plans to scrap national insurance. Jeremy Hunt's told LBC it won't be paid for by increasing the state pension age. And the opening of the UK's biggest live music venue's been cancelled again at the last minute. Manchester's Co-op Live Arena says tonight's gig won't go ahead because of a technical issue. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed down 22 points at 81.21. The pound buys $1.24 and €1.16. LBC weather, heavy rain and possible thunderstorms in central and southern parts of England and Wales, lows of 6 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. It's 3 minutes past 8 on LBC. Welcome to Wednesday's Cross Question. With me in the studio for the next hour, Baroness Claire Fox, to my left, non-affiliated peer, who's the director of the Academy of Ideas think tank. Next to her is David Simmonds, Conservative MP for Northwood and Pinner. What happened to Ruislip? Wasn't that in your title?
Ruislip, Northwood and Pinner, that's the...
Yeah, you see, honestly, right, I will announce you as that in the future.
Ruislip.
I don't. I actually spoke at a school in your constituency recently. He chairs the all-party Parliamentary group on migration. Ava Vidal is next to me. She's a comedian and journalist. And next to her, Sam Tarry, Labour MP for Ilford South. They, of course, are here to answer your questions. It's very simple. You just need to dial 0345 6060 973. And also, you can WhatsApp us on that same number. You can text 84850 or say, Alexa, send a comment to LBC. And please do watch us on Global Player.
Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. Cross Question with Iain Dale. This is LBC.
Just before we start, I know a lot of political geeks will watch this hour. You're going to want to watch us tomorrow because I'm not presenting my normal show tomorrow, Ben Kentish is. But from 10 p.m, we've got an 8-hour local election extravaganza. Sheila Fogarty will be with me. Andrew Marr will be with me. Ben Kentish will be with me when he foots it down from Leicester Square as well. We have lots of political guests and we'll be going right through the night until 6 a.m. And it'll be live on Global Player and on the LBC YouTube channel. So I hope you'll join us for at least part of it, even if you do have to go to bed a little bit later. But I warn you now that the longer the night goes on, the more slapstick it gets. And that Sheila Fogarty, honestly, she can be very, very funny. Right, let's go to your first question. It's from Simon. It's a text question. Is this latest Home Office video of migrant detentions just shameful performance cruelty? Sam Tarry.
Yes. I mean, look, releasing that video over such a controversial policy that we've debated in House Lords and House Commons for months and months and months, that, in my view, is in breach of international law. You know, it's just about demonising people. And, you know, I think Dominic Cummings was quoted in today's Standard, basically saying, in this period of an election, you sort of reach for the baseball bat of immigration and start battering people. Well, it's a shocking, terrible metaphor, but that is what that video is. There's no reason the Home Office during Purdah would be releasing a video like that about a key totemic policy for the Tory party that's been such a disaster for them in terms of the sort of fighting around it, not getting it through Parliament, just literally 24 hours before we go to the polls.
It could be a cock-up rather than conspiracy.
There's never cock-ups like that in politics.
Just playing devil's advocate.
Over the past few years, we've actually seen a huge, in my view, politicisation, particularly of the Home Office. Under Cyrilla Braverman, there was evidence of even direct operational interference in the police, and that is, shocking. And this is just another example of that. I think, I can't wait actually for Labour to get in, and people like Sue Gray, and people who actually know how to run an ethical civil service, to actually be in charge, not politicising it and doing things like this. And by the way, this is a video which people are going to see, and maybe that's the point of it, are going to be absolutely frightened to death. People in my constituency are going to be petrified about that, and it just feels to me this is again a race to the bottom in terms of how do we batter the most vulnerable, the most poor, when actually the Conservatives are tanking all over the country in these elections.
David Simmonds.
A 7-year-old girl died this week trying to cross the channel in a small boat, and this is an issue where the public clearly want to see that the government is doing something to bring an end to that, and that's been the main focus of the debate on tackling illegal migration. I think the video itself is quite uncomfortable viewing, but I know, having been around the issue of migration for a very long time, including 24 years as a London councillor, under governments of all parties, this kind of thing is publicised. People want to know what actually happens when a detention raid is carried out, what happens inside our deportation centres, what's the process that people follow, how are people treated. And I think it is good that that's illuminated. I think this is uncomfortable viewing, but it's part of a picture where we need to show that we have a migration system that is humane, but that will stop people losing their lives in the English Channel.
I mean, there is an argument for saying, well, this is open government in a sense. They're showing what happens in these kind of raids, if that's the right word. But Sam's right, isn't he, about the timing of this? I mean, it's not coincidental.
But I've just seen the video coming in this evening. Whether it's coincidental or not, I think I can't answer that question, but I know the Home Office regularly invite documentary makers, and certainly we've seen them around my constituency looking at the way, for example, illegal migrants and other people in the asylum system are housed, what the consequences of that are. And as you say, I think open government is a good thing. This is an area of significant public interest, and it's important that people understand both how tough that is on the individuals that are concerned with it, but also get the message that the government understands this is important to people, and we want to see that we are doing something to prevent anybody else losing their life in the English Channel in the way that, unfortunately, has become all too common in recent years.
Ava.
I agree a little bit with both. I agree with what David had said about a 7-year-old girl died, but I think we should open safe routes. I'm not sure that watching this video, I watched the video, it just felt really voyeuristic and really nasty. I agree with what Sam...
Is it any more voyeuristic than nasty than watching one of the programmes that are on television every day of the week showing police arresting somebody for whatever offence? It's no more voyeuristic than that, is it?
I think it's more heightened than that. I personally believe, with everything that's happened in the media, everything that we've been discussing, the amount of time this is spent in Parliament, it's such a hot political issue that I do think it is more, the police ones are a bit funny. But I would say that I agreed with everything Sam said until he said, let's wait for Labour to get in and it'll all be great. No, I don't think Labour can do anything about this. I don't agree with that at all. They've already said they're not going to reverse anything. They're not going to bring anyone...
They have said they'd reverse the Rwanda
they said
policy,
that now?
Yeah.
Oh, OK. What day did... I mean, Keir Starmer changes his mind so much. I don't expect him to stick to that anyway.
OK. Claire?
I think performative is the right word, but the whole of the debate around illegal migration, asylum seekers, has felt performative for a while. One thing you might say about the timing, because everyone's being very cynical about the local elections, is it's also the case that this only got passed through Parliament and through the Lords the other week. And that was largely because performative opposition to the bill. And to be honest with you, I just got fed up of it in the end. An unelected chamber, going through the motions, everybody knew in the end that Labour would give way. But it was kind of a repetition, a self-righteous, self-regarding repetition. And I don't just mean from Labour, I mean from the opposition in general. And don't get me wrong, I don't like the bill. I, in fact, abstained when it came into the Lords.
How courageous.
No, well, actually, it's not. I'm not pretending to be courageous. It was a terrible bill.
But surely, why not vote against it then?
No, because you don't. It's not like that in the Lords, is it? Where you don't vote. You either vote for amendments or not. It's a slightly peculiar situation without boring everyone with the constitutional question of it. But I spoke, and I made my feelings clear. The reason I'm saying that was because I think that we've got a serious problem of a lack of trust in politicians when international law and unelected lords are used to stop a government bill, even if I don't like it. That's my point. Scrutinising is one thing, but it dragged on, so that's one thing. The other thing is that I think that, Sam, when you were saying, people will be terrified, constituents will be terrified, in view of the fact, whether you like it or not, that this bill they're saying, is to be a deterrent, and that the idea is it will be for people who are not legally here. I don't know that's going to quite cut it, but I have always said during this whole discussion that one of the groups of people who are not taken into consideration in this debate enough and are often dismissed as being somehow backward or Neanderthal or xenophobic, are people who feel that the situation of illegal migration has got out of control and that nobody will do anything about it. And they also can feel not terrified, but frustrated, marginalised, demonised, people who live in this country from all ethnicities, by the way. It's not an ethnic question. It's a question of whether you feel that people are taking you for mugs, taking advantage of the situation, and undoubtedly some of the people in the small boats are desperate, and undoubtedly some of the people in the small boats are not desperate. They want to live in the UK. I don't blame them. I've got every sympathy and empathy with that. But that's not the same as it being presented to us as if you would only stop being heartless, these people could flee their war zones and so on. It's like being constantly gaslit by people, because you just go, we know that's not true. Let's have a sensible discussion about asylum, by the way. I think we should rip up the international codes. I think we should start again and have a UK asylum system based on what this country should offer asylum to. I agree with the safe routes. You can't get here unless there's a safe route. So I don't like the Rwanda bill, but the hypocrisy on the other side drives me mad.
Can I just make a quick point? Cool. That Sam had said it would terrify people in his constituency, and Claire said, I can tell you as a black person, when they're out in Stratford, the Home Office, they are stopping black and brown people, whether you live here or not. So it will terrify people, because there are some people who are here legally who may struggle with the language, but they might have been here for years. So when you do implement these kind of things, they go for people who look like me, and that needs to be. So it's nothing more annoying.
Just explain that a bit further. Yeah. I mean, so you say you've witnessed.
I've been stopped
by Home Office immigration people.
Yeah.
On what basis do they stop you?
They come out at Stratford or they come out at King's Cross. They start stopping people. They ask you what your immigration status. Yes. Well, not randomly. Thisly.
No, but I mean, with no cause.
No, they don't have to. They will come. Now, technically, you don't have to answer their questions because there's been legal advice that's given out. But we all know how nasty it can get if you don't. I have been stopped by the Home Office before and asked my status.
Just on the basis of your skin colour?
Well, they'll say it wasn't that. They'll say it was a random check. But when you look at all the other random stops that all look like you have to say, come on now.
I mean, that's terrible if that's happening. But one of the problems is that immigration is that the people who run immigration in this country have failed to stop anyone. So I'm amazed they're doing any random checks, because they're certainly not checking on the people they're meant to be checking on. One of the problems is that border control does not control the borders. And the whole point about being a country is that you need to know who lives here and who doesn't. I, by the way, am quite liberal about saying maybe we should have more people come in. But you do need to have a system that works. The system is not working. So it's horrific if they're randomly stopping people. It just seems really weird to me, because on the borders, they're not stopping anyone, it seems to me. It's not happening. It's weird.
Sam, I noticed you didn't jump to your leader's defence when Ava was talking earlier about she believes that Labour won't change anything.
I'm glad that Labour have actually come out today after a few people on the front bench mistakenly said that we would keep the Rwanda policy in place. It's not only, you can look at all the cost implications, it's completely bonkers, let alone the moral and the international law aspects of it as well. Look, it cannot be beyond the wit of the political class of this country to have a managed migration policy, one that isn't based on xenophobia, isn't used for political reasons to whip up hysteria. And the thing that I would observe about all of this debate and the language that's been used by successive Home Secretaries and that's worsened over the last few years is that the language they're using, the things that they're talking about were things, and I will say this, that I was debating and fighting with the British National Party on the streets of Barking and Dagenham in the mid-2000s. No, I'm sorry. They said we need to deport people to foreign countries as a deterrent. They said that these people are taking our houses. All of the different things that are now being said, we have seen, not just on this issue, other issues of law and order, a mainstreaming of the language of what in this country 10, 15 years ago was considered the far right. And that has now gone into the Conservative Party. And in fact, if you listen and you speak to more moderate or mainstream or One Nation Conservatives, they would agree that the stuff that the far fringes of the Conservative Party now are talking about in 10 years ago would never have been acceptable in the Conservative Party. And that to me is a very dangerous place, because it means we are now mimicking the sort of populist far-right politics that actually has quite a lot of elected people right across Europe.
I think what you're failing to recognise there is the BNP were in favour of deporting people who are legally here. Yeah, that's not what the case is here.
And I'm not saying that there's not an issue in terms of the anger. I campaigned in Dagenham. I know how angry people are and have been in the past about people they perceive that have got things that they haven't, they feel they had a right to, at their expense, right? That's a real thing that led in part to the rise of the BNP. We can debate the rights and wrongs of that, but that wasn't their feelings. It's one of the things that I'm sure Claire would agree led to people hitting the big button of Brexit because they were angry about these things. I definitely recognise that, but I just think that we can have a humane situation in terms of migration that's properly funded. If we need to have more people at the borders, if we need to have a properly funded border force, if we need to get rid of the chaos that's underway at the Home Office. And my constituency office, we deal with tens of thousands of immigration related cases every year. We know the Home Office is completely defunct in terms of ability to actually deal with things. If we were to sort out some of those issues, I believe genuinely we could have proper, safe, legal pathways to this country that would stop people going into the gangmasters' boats.
The problem is that John Reid described, well, he didn't actually describe the Home Office, I think he described the Immigration Service as not fit for purpose. And this was back in 2006. We're 18 years ahead of that now, and no government since then has been able to do anything about it. I don't understand why that is in many ways, but
part of it, Ian, is because there's a fundamental dishonesty from actually a lot of politicians about the fact that in this country we haven't had an honest debate about, and this is what Claire was alluding to, do we need migration? If you go to the hospitality sector, there are many places that can't, run their pubs, run their restaurants because we don't now have the migrant labour here. The same in the farming and agricultural sector. We never have an honest debate about that. We've got a choice. Are British people going to go and do those low-paid jobs or not?
Sorry.
I want to come to David because you chair the all-party group on migration. I mean, Sam's got a point here, hasn't it? That we never have an honest. I think we try and have an honest debate about it, but for the political classes, immigration is a word which people want to steer clear of because they're frightened of it for sometimes understandable reasons. And people on Sam's side of the argument seem to be almost afraid to, it's a bit like Remainers, couldn't articulate the arguments for staying in the EU. Sometimes people find it difficult to articulate the arguments for migration and they're frightened of the electoral consequences, particularly if they're in marginal seats. What can be done about that?
The challenge clearly in the debate is seeing the big picture. So we know we've got a very high level of migration to the UK at the moment, very high level of economic migration. So lots of people coming to the country under visa schemes which allow people to come and fill jobs. Most of those are in the NHS and the care sector where we know there's huge demand, but a lot of them are in areas like tech where we know there's skills shortages. We then see significant numbers of people coming to the UK as students who are coming to study in our universities. They're paying foreign student fees. That's helping our higher education system to perform really well. The area that people tend to focus on is the bit which we're all concerned about, specifically small boats as a subset of illegal migration. Those people who are putting their lives at risk and who are part of a system of organised criminal smuggling, and that's what we need to tackle, and that's what the Rwanda scheme is about. And I have to say, I've sat through all of the debates on Rwanda and the Illegal Migration Bill and the Nationality and Borders Act. I've got a lot of sympathy with, I think, the tone that Sam has set out. We're in an incredibly diverse city. My constituency has over 100 different first languages. We have people from all over the world who come as refugees. But we need to make sure, as Claire outlined, that we've got a system that properly manages that process. My party has set out the Rwanda scheme. I've met migrants waiting to cross the channel in small boats who said, yeah, that will be a concern for us because we haven't travelled all this way across Europe, across Africa, across the Middle East to find ourselves sent to Rwanda. That definitely has a deterrent factor. The question for those who are the critics is, if you believe the system needs to be better managed, what's the alternative? Do you have a better idea, and can you set that out so the public can see in a transparent way what your plans would be and compare them?
But then they also introduced new rules to essentially prevent a lot of people coming to this country because they won't meet the minimum earnings threshold. I had an email yesterday from a listener to the programme, Nikki, who's a great James O'Brien fan, and she was saying that she lives in Italy. She is British. Her husband is Italian. He lived in this country for, I think, 40 years, paid into the system, paid his taxes, did all the right things. They then moved to Italy. They now find that they can't come back to this country because he doesn't, or jointly, they don't earn enough. And that's where people think, well, the system is mitigating against the very people who obey the rules. But I won't get on my hobby horse on that because we're very late for a break. It's 8:20.
This is LBC.
Join the nation in cinching it. Buy your perfect car online and get first-class assistance from start to finish.
Your new car, madam?
With friendly customer service available 7 days a week.
Hello, this is Cinch. How can I help you?
An expert walkthrough of your new car when it's delivered. And a faff-free 14-day money-back guarantee. Hardly surprising Cinch is rated excellent on Trustpilot. So join the nation in absolutely cinching it. Search Cinch and buy your next car today. Returns subject to mileage restrictions, T's and C's apply.
Ugh, I never liked her anyway.
He's clearly a narcissist.
Well, she stopped. She's seeing the kids.
He negotiates for a living. Lawyer up and protect yourself.
We get it. You mean well. But when someone you love gets divorced, saying these things does more harm than good. That's where we come in. Amicable is a legal service that makes divorce kinder and simpler. No demonising, no aggression, just better outcomes for everyone. Amicable.co.uk. Divorce made kinder.
Toner and ink.
Get yours in a blink and for less than you think
at cartridgepeople.com.
For unbeatable prices.
Cartridge People.
Printing sorted.
See online for our price promise.
Here at the Virgin Games Development Hub, we run all sorts of tests to make sure our players get the most thrilling experiences, wherever they are. Like testing our game recommendations feature for people playing in the bath. Or our daily free games for people playing on the train. Or the perfect amount of free spins you get when you play £10. Let me see. Oh, it's 30.
Get 30 free spins when you play £10. Virgin Games. Serious about play. Visit virgingames.com. 18 plus, UK only. New members only. Must opt in. Free spins on Double Bubble, 1p coin size, max size, 30-day expiry. Full rules at virgingames.com. Play responsibly. BeGambleAware.org.
Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
23 minutes past 8. David Simmonds, Conservative MP, Sam Tarry, Labour MP, Ava Vidal, comedian and journalist, and Baroness Claire Fox with us answering your questions. Here's a call from David in Uxbridge. It's not this David in Uxbridge on the panel, though. It's a different, well, at least, unless it's AI David. Hello, David.
Yeah, hi Ian and hi panel. So my question for the panel is, are the growing campus protests, and the growing anti-war protests across America and across the world, really, are they on the right side of history? And the second part is, will history judge the support the war has received from Western leaders very harshly? So there's two parts. Like I'm comparing it a bit with the Vietnam. How they were on the right side of history and the leaders were judged harshly. Is there a parallel here? Are the protesters on the right side of history?
Claire Fox.
I don't think they're anti-war protests. I think they're anti-Israel protests. That's the first thing to suggest. I can't stand the phrase "the right side of history" because it effectively closes down debate. It's one of those things about, are you a backward Neanderthal dinosaur type or are you on the right side of history? So I think it's kind of historically illiterate.
Oh, you looked at David when you said that.
I feel very strongly that something as very unpleasant is happening on these university campuses, but I absolutely defend their right to have the protests, to have the sit-ins, to do whatever they want. That's an entirely legitimate free speech right to protest. I would, go along with that. The kind of things, just because we've only, to be brief, where people are kind of dressed up in almost militarised gear, sitting outside the library, saying, "Are you a Zionist?" and what, not letting you in if you try and get in. The driving people out who are they say are Zio genocide supporters, and I mean some of the language is pretty offensive to say the least. These are their fellow Jewish students, by the way, and the way that. I think that the absolute demonisation of anyone who's pro-Israel, the inability to understand what October the 7th meant, and I have had decades, because I'm old, I've had decades of having been somebody who supported Palestinian self-determination, was horrified at the Islamicisation of the movement in the Middle East, the fact that Hamas took over in Gaza and actually butchered, and I mean butchered, people who supported Palestinian liberation, treated women and people from marginalised communities like animals and dirt and locked them up and so on and so forth. To then have a situation where, when you're saying, it's just like the Vietnam War. I just watched some speeches today from some of the universities in America that were heralding Hamas as freedom fighters. I mean, this is not hyperbole, saying that the Houthis were the greatest rebels and that we could now look to Yemen as friends of liberation. I mean, come on. And so what I think is that we've got ourselves into a really confused, morally and politically confused place. What I'd really like to see, because there's obviously two sides in this argument, I completely appreciate that, is there are people who think that Israel's gone too far. There's people who think that their war, the way that they're fighting this war is without mercy. There are people who are more forgiving of that because of what happened, and they feel it's an existential fight for their lives and so on. All of that's true, but we're certainly not debating this in any kind of a serious way, which is what you would want on a university campus.
Okay. Ava. That was a big sigh.
Yeah, because you know what? I don't even want to talk about this, to be completely honest. I don't. I feel that it's such a toxic debate. I believe, just to answer the question, I believe that the people on the university campuses are entitled to protest if they want. I think having snipers in university and stuff, I think all that's going too far. The way that Claire has characterised those reference speeches, I haven't seen what she's talking about. That's not what I've seen. But I also feel like when it comes to the conversation about Israel, I believe there's just not that much freedom to be able to talk. I've been to Israel. I used to date an Israeli, but I went to Israel, and when you're in Israel, they speak so much more freely than we do. They can say, you know what I mean? The stuff that they say in Israel about the whole situation, those conversations could never happen here. And what I'm wary of is that when you do try to say something, sometimes your words are twisted, and I don't want my words to be twisted. I do object to the term Islamification. As a Muslim, I object to that term because I think that carries connotations to it that are just not right. I don't like that at all. I would say that in terms of the Israel issue, I don't think it's a Muslim Jewish issue. I think it is an issue about land. It is an issue about who owns the land, who's got the right to the land. That's what the issue is. It's not anything. And I think when we keep putting Jewish people, Muslim, there's so many who've got such different points of view. I think it all gets mixed up. It's not a religious fight. It's a fight over land.
Sam.
Look, I mean, this is one of the biggest issues in my constituency. I probably have more correspondence on what's happening in the Middle East.
Did you have a large Muslim vote?
Yeah, but to be honest, like local churches are raising money for Gaza. It's not, I went to see my local Gurdwara not too long ago, and actually they brought up what's going on in Gaza with me, and I was a little bit surprised about that, actually. So it's definitely not like a communal issue for one community whatsoever. I think a lot of people will feel that the reason these campus protests and protests in this country, because we're on 6 months now of pretty much almost weekend protests in London have happened, is because in the past, Israel has been able to posit itself as the only democracy in the Middle East. It's the most ethical army in the world, all these different things. And a lot of people bought into some of that. But now people have smartphones in which the reality of how barbaric their war has been on civilians, and with 35,000 dead, has been beamed into the palms of millions of people around the world. And actually, I think that in time to come, 10, 15 years, Israel will regret actually how it's carried out this war. I do actually believe that. I think already many Israelis think that as well. Netanyahu will get kicked out at the next election, there's no doubt about that. And the most vociferous advocates, by the way, for the ending of this barbaric war are actually the parents of the hostages. And I think if you listen to them, it's very, very telling that actually what's gone on is, of course, Israel's right to defend itself against the awful and disgraceful attacks that Hamas just launched out of the blue. But to then, if you listen to the language of Israeli ministers themselves, this very much quickly became actually about implementing a plan they wanted, which is to essentially expel the Palestinian people from Gaza. But it's their own words, Claire. It's their own words. If you listen to people like Ben Gvir, these are extremists that no one in this country should be supporting. And even David Cameron, alongside people like me, called for sanctions against some of these Israeli ministers because they were so extreme. And when you've got extremists like that on both sides in charge, you are going to find it very difficult to find peace. And I think, I certainly don't support any of the language that Claire mentioned in terms of those student protests. But the thing that's different about these protests compared to the Vietnam protests, the Vietnam protests, for a long period of time, did not have actually the support of the majority of people in the US. All of the opinion polling now in the US says that these students, in terms of broadly what they're standing for, the sort of end of that war, the end of support to Israel, has huge support in in the US. And that is both a problem for Biden and actually meaning that they're expressing something which is actually more widely held in the student movement in the US. And that's a big difference to Vietnam in the 1960s.
David, I am going to come to you, but after the news, because we have another Israel-related question, so we'll put them together. It's 8:31 on LBC. Time for the news headlines with Daryl Jackson.
A 36-year-old man's been charged with the murder of 14-year-old Daniel Andurian in Hainault yesterday. Marcus Monzo, a dual Spanish-Brazilian national from Newham, will appear in court tomorrow. The two most likely candidates to replace Humza Yousaf as Scotland's First Minister have talked privately. John Swinney and Kate Forbes held an informal meeting yesterday. And the opening of the UK's biggest live music venue has been put back again. Manchester's Co-op Live Arena says tonight's gig will no longer go ahead because of a venue-related technical issue. LBC weather: heavy rain and possible thunderstorms in central and southern parts of England and Wales with lows of 6 degrees.
This is LBC.
Flying from Luton Airport? The Luton Airport Express takes you from London St Pancras to the terminal in as little as 32 minutes, from just £10. So let's go. Let's go for adventures with friends, sun and sea with the family, or a city escape somewhere romantic. There's no traffic and no stress. So pack your bags and let's go on the Luton Airport Express. Buy your tickets now at lutonairportexpress.co.uk.
Amazon offer employees up to £8,000 towards training and career growth, like Daniel. He's now a trained software developer, and to him, the gentle tap of his keyboard is the best sound in the world. Because it's a reminder of how much his life has changed. In 2 years, he's gone from warehouse employee to working his dream job. And even his son says his coding skills aren't bad, which is high praise from a teenager. At Amazon, we're committed to training and career growth. Conditions and eligibility criteria apply.
Let's go, get in, move it! What's wrong with the car?
Flat battery.
What?
You absolute...
It's okay, lads. I'm with the AA. Oh, lovely.
With more expert patrols in more places, we'll get you back on the road in no time. Join the UK's best breakdown service from $7.50 a month. The AA, always ahead. New customers only, T's and C's apply. Verify best and patrol numbers at theaa.com/best.
What to give Colin from the office for his birthday? Sure, you know how he feels about spreadsheet maintenance and the latest upgrade of the work IT system, but his hopes, loves and needs... Nope, no idea. So, why not give a scratch card from the National Lottery? What's not to like about that? The National Lottery. Best gift ever. Please gift responsibly, and remember, you need to be 18 to buy, gift and play. Even though it's a gift, rules and procedures apply.
Listeners, we interrupt the airwaves to share an incredible discovery.
The reason why Britain hasn't been so great of late is because the country hasn't been eating enough Weetabix. We must get to work in rebuilding Great Britain, bix by bix, by delivering Weetabix to whoever's in charge of fixing potholes, to VAR, and people who somehow manage to park over 2 bays. To Britain, we must say. Have you had your Weetabix?
Leading Britain's conversation. Cross question with Iain Dale. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
8:35 on our panel, David Simmonds, Conservative MP, Ava Vidal, comedian and journalist, Sam Tarry, Labour MP, and Baroness Claire Fox. Now, we were answering a question about the protests in America. We didn't quite get time to go to David, so I'm going to come to him in a second. But I want to also include a follow-up question from Yusuf in Leicester. Yusuf, hi.
Hi, Ian. Just before I ask the question, is it possible, if it be afforded the opportunity to respond to whatever answers are given to my question? Very briefly, though.
Well, we'll see how time is going, but in theory, yes.
Okay. Now, quickly, basically, my question is, does the panel think that now, as the ICC appears to be, according to Israeli news, that there is an impending, they're going to issue an arrest warrant for Netanyahu, for Yoav Gallant, as well as the chief of the IDF. Surely the G7 countries should stop supporting Israel at this moment in time, according to all the crimes that have been committed.
Right. David Simmonds, first of all, the protests on university campuses in the US, and indeed they've started here, and also Yusuf's question.
I think it's very welcome that there's been broad cross-party support for the British government's position on it, which is that we seek a sustainable ceasefire and a big increase in the level of humanitarian aid. I think that's a sensible response for the UK government, and I think the points that have been made by everybody else on the panel are spot on. This is an incredibly complicated debate. Gross oversimplification certainly won't help, and we know that the complicated history, the politics involved, are all going to make moving to a sustainable peace settlement challenging. But I think it's absolutely right that the sensible countries of the world should push towards that. I think one of the things that really concerns me, I represent a very diverse constituency. I have a large Jewish population, quite a large Muslim population as well. But clearly the UK's quite small Jewish population is feeling quite fearful because they're seeing scenes like this on the news. It looks very dangerous, it looks very intimidating, it's causing a lot of anxiety amongst people in this country. And I think, therefore, as politicians, that's the reason why that broad cross-party support is so welcome, because it shows that we are committed to making sure that the UK exerts a positive influence on this situation, that we try and bring about that sustainable peace settlement and the release of the hostages. And that is the thing that we should be focused on.
You haven't really answered the question, though, about the protests or Yusuf's question.
Well, my personal view is they're not on the correct side of history, because the way forward is to seek a sustainable ceasefire. We need to get the peace process, the normalisation of relationships that was already in hand with Israel and its neighbouring countries, back on track. That's what offers the best hope for a sustainable economic situation, for peace for people in Gaza. And clearly what's currently happening is not contributing in any helpful way to that. So I think the influence that's been exerted by the US, by the UK, by countries like France, the European Union, all to say, to the Israelis, you need to follow the rules of war. You need to make sure that what you are doing is justified in every single instance. But as an ally that we know is engaged in a legal operation to defend yourself, we will continue to support you. I think that is the correct policy approach that reflects that complicated balance of issues that are going on there.
Ava, I know you said you didn't really want to talk about this issue. I'll give you a free pass on this one if you want. What about Yusuf's question then? Should the G7 countries stop? I don't know why he wants to restrict it to G7 countries, but there we go. Stop supporting Israel's war, as he puts it.
Well, I suppose he's saying G7 countries because those are the ones who are actually supporting it. I think that we should follow international law, and we should be wary of what is going on in the ICC, and we should act accordingly.
Sam?
Look, I mean, we can't prejudge, what any of the international court is going to say, but, looking at what's happened, I think is a very high probability that what's gone on will actually be found within international law to be genocide. And I find it extremely troubling that we have potentially, we've had both RAF jets scrambled in recent weeks to protect Israel. We've had
Why is that concerning? That was a good thing, surely.
Look, right, But what's been done to protect Palestinian civilians? Absolutely nothing. Nothing. It took us 6 months to even get to the point of calling for the so-called sustainable ceasefire. I've actually only ever broken the whip of my party once, and I did do it to be one of over 150 MPs who voted for an immediate ceasefire. We shouldn't have even been debating this. Clearly what's gone on is beyond the pale, and I think will be found to be well beyond international law.
Claire, as brief as you can, because I know you've got a lot to say.
I know. I'm unimpressed by people who say it's just to do with international law, because, to be honest, one of the things that's happened in this country is, without any international court having found anyone guilty of genocide, Israel has been accused of committing genocide, which I do not think is a correct understanding of genocide. It's a brutal, vicious war. All wars are brutal and vicious. There have been many wars that have been brutal and vicious that have not led to people wandering around, not just wandering around, gangs of people following
MPs. More children killed in this conflict than in every single war for the last 5 years.
According to Hamas.
First of all,
they're not according to Hamas.
First of all, I don't, because that's why you can't go through all the figures. But it is true that the figures are very ambivalent and fought over. Hamas recently themselves brought out figures that completely contradicted their earlier figures and were a lot less as it goes.
They are finding people under rubble all the time.
Yeah, I'm not trying. That's why I don't want to get into the figures thing. But that's why I'm saying, if you're going to say genocide is numbers, it's not. It's intention.
No, it's the pictures of mass graves of people bulldozing people in, stuff that all of us have seen on television.
You have decided, regardless of international law, it's genocide, which is exactly what's happened.
I haven't decided that, but I think that there's a very strong chance that will happen.
Well, regardless
in that meantime, we should not be selling arms to Israel, and we're still doing it. We're even giving
I'm suggesting that, therefore, it's rather, when people say, I really care about international law, there's no international legal decision that it's genocide, but everybody decided, because they've seen it on the Twitter, that it's genocide. I'm suggesting that it is not genocide based on the international definition of genocide, but I also think there's lots of double standards. I do also think that when you have politicians in this country and students and all sorts of people being followed around by people intimidating, shouting that they're genocide, people in your own parties, intimidated.
Indeed, and that's totally outrageous.
Every single time, because they're accused of being apologists for genocide. And I think that what's happened is that when previous wars have happened, and there have been some brutal wars, right, involving lots of people being killed, murdered, massacred, and there has not been this force, we have to ask why Israel's treated as an exceptional country. And also, it is the case that I could not get over, still can't get over, the fact that what we saw on October the 7th was, by some people celebrated, at the very least treated with indifference, that the sexual violence that we saw was denied, so everybody started to become a victim blamer, right? And even now, when people say we want to have ceasefire and peace, I thought it was terrible, by the way, Sam, when you said the hostages, families of the hostages. Yes, I've just come back from visiting Israel, where I met the families of the hostages, and my God, they're no fans of Netanyahu, but let me tell you, they're pretty clear about what they want to see happen to Hamas, right? And they would not be going along with the students of Columbia University.
Did you go to Gaza as well, or just Israel?
Do you understand that there's a war going on in Gaza, and even I know.
I know that people have still visited Gaza.
No, it is true that I went to Israel.
Michael Rappaport has visited, Deborah Messing has visited, Lee Kern has visited.
Right, I went to Israel, and I did not go to Gaza, apart from to go over the border to see actually the aid trucks sitting there not being moved by aid agencies, which was an interesting revelation in and of itself. But what I was going to say was that if we're going to start quoting the families of the hostages, let's be clear that they are absolutely critical of their own government. I thought it was a brilliant point you made yourself about when you visited Israel and everybody was arguing. There's massive political arguments going on in Israel, but all the people who live in Israel are Zionists, right? And it's the Zionists, i.e. Jewish people who support Israel's existence, who are being attacked in the West for simply supporting the right of Israel to exist. That is off the pale when it comes to proper political discussion on this question. You're trying to destroy a country.
I just want to have a brief comment from Yusuf, and I mean brief, Yusuf, if you can, please, because we're running way over time.
Yeah, okay, I'll keep it as brief as possible. Basically, I'll be honest with you, I would invite the whole panel to come with me to Gaza. Let's see firsthand without making assumptions of what is really reality of what's going on. Like Dr. Junaid, who came back from Gaza just recently from the UK, he went there and he saw firsthand, and he was on Piers Morgan, I think it was yesterday. You need to see that yourselves, first of all. And, the reality of what is going on is far more extreme than what we're being told. And believe me, I don't think there's anything I've seen as how can I put it? I won't use the word evil, but the most worst heinous crimes I've seen in Gaza, I've never seen in my life.
OK, Yusuf, thank you very much for the question. We'll come to a different subject in just a moment. It's 8:45.
This is LBC.
Go, get in! Move it! What's wrong with the car?
Flat battery.
What? You absolute...
It's okay, lads. I'm with the AA.
Oh, lovely.
With more expert patrols in more places, we'll get you back on the road in no time. Join the UK's best breakdown service from $7.50 a month. The AA, always ahead. New customers only, T's and C's apply. Verify best and patrol numbers at theaa.com/best.
Summer's out there. Rent a car with Enterprise and unlock it. Prepay and save 10% on your Enterprise rental this summer. Terms and conditions apply.
Here in the Southeast, we sell amazing products and services the whole world wants.
We're global processing services from London, and we help people pay in innovative ways in over 48 countries.
Whilst at Naturally Tribal in Milton Keynes, our all-natural skincare range soothes skin conditions in 5 countries.
So whether you're new to exporting or experienced, explore global growth for your business with free support from the UK government. Access information, training, events and expert advice to help you find new customers overseas. Visit great.gov.uk to get started.
McDonald's are making small improvements to our classic burgers, searing our 100% British and Irish beef patties so they're even juicier. And we're serving them hotter for meltier cheese, all in new toastier buns. The classics, now a little more Comparison with prior classic burgers, served after 11 a.m, subject to availability.
MJ, the multi-award-winning new musical thrilling West End audiences. It's a ravishing spectacle, says the Evening Standard. Gravity-defying dancing and all the mega hits, says The Guardian. And the Daily Mail raves, you can't beat it. MJ at London's Prince Edward Theatre, but now at mjthemusical.com.
Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
Immediately
David Simmonds is here, Ava Vidal, Sam Tarry and Baroness Claire Fox. A text question from Jen, who says Labour's watered down their workers' rights policy. Now apparently they won't ban 0 hours contracts. Is it not long overdue to ban these exploitative contracts, given Labour have been speaking about this since at least 2015? Sam Tarry.
No, look, this might be wishful thinking from Peter Mandelson and his allies in the Labour Party who want to see a weakening of our commitment to workers' rights. But I've spoken to both the lead and one of the shadow ministers on this entire project, and there's absolutely no watering down whatsoever. You might imagine, people from the TUC, etc., very angry about that briefing this morning. Just to be clear on the 0 hours contracts thing, is actually a much cleverer thing. Those 0 hours contracts won't exist unless you opt to have one. What I mean by that is, so Labour's policy is going to be that the previous 12 weeks of hours, you are going to base your legal entitlement to a contract on that. So if you say, actually, I want to have a 0 hours contract, you would be able to then have that. So we're not going to say it's completely illegal in that sense. But for the 99% of people, it would be an effective ban, because no low-paid worker is going to say, I want to have a contract. It means I'm at the behest of my manager getting angry with me and saying, well, this week I'm not going to give you any hours or whatever. That sort of nonsense is what actually does happen. So this will guarantee that you can have a proper work hours-based contract based on the previous 12 weeks.
So basically this was an unauthorised briefing to a couple of national newspapers, and it's all rubbish.
Look, you know how it is in political parties. There are those that want to see a weakening of positions on stuff, but this will be one of our flagship policies. It will be delivered in the first 100 days. And you know what? It's one of the things I'm proud to go out and campaign for Keir, for Angela and for the Labour Party on, because I genuinely believe it will change the lives of people in this country. We've had, over the last 30 years, not only a huge wage crisis, but an erosion of rights over a long period of time. And we need to rebalance that. And this is actually going to begin that process of doing that, and will be delivered in the first 100 days of the Parliament.
Ava?
I mean, you know how I feel about the Labour Party. I just don't trust anything that Keir Starmer says. He's done so many about turns on all these policies. I mean, we'll wait and see if it happens. I think at this point, I would rather put my faith in another party than believe that they are going to do any rights. They'll just come in and they'll blame everything.
Put your faith in?
I think at this point, after speaking and hearing...
Don't say what I think you're going to say.
What?
Go on. No, I want you to answer.
No, I was going to say Zach Polanski.
Oh,
the
Green Party?
Yeah.
I was the feeling you might have said a different one.
No. Who did you think I would say?
I'll tell you afterwards.
Conservatives, obviously.
Listen, they turned me down. I wanted to join the Conservatives just for the fun of it.
They turned you down?
Just for the fun of it. I think they might have researched
me. What do you mean?
Like, when I said I wanted to join the Conservative, they don't trust me. They don't trust me at all. So, no. The only reason I joined the Conservative Party is if I could... I don't know. I mean, they're on their way out. You might as well have fun now. I'll tell you what to do. Go tomorrow to the N22 committee and vote no confidence in Rishi Sunak. Just keep doing it repeatedly until the election.
It won't be tomorrow. Tomorrow's election day. Claire Fox.
It's reassuring what Sam says, and I actually really appreciate as well that more subtle approach to 0 hours, because actually it's the flexibility that people want, and there are people who do require, or, you know, as somebody was saying, but, you know, whether you're dealing with childcare and you're a parent, or if you're a student, or all sorts of things. So it's good to have that flexibility, but I like the idea that workers' rights will be defended under Labour. However, what I can say, first of all, I've got some sympathy with that. I'm not quite sure I trust them line. But it's more than that. I think that actually attacks on rights have changed slightly from the more old-fashioned trade union rights. And if you look at a lot of the employment tribunal disputes that there have been recently, they've often been about assaults on civil liberties, you know, disputes and rows over, for example, how HR have used EDI policies, equity, diversity and inclusion policies, to effectively harass and bully people. And actually people are winning those employment tribunals now quite significantly. I mean, I'm not going to go into the issues, but there are certain issues that are hot, you know, topics. But you'll find if you go and talk to people, for example, who work in the college and university sector, and they'll say our union went along with the employers at agreeing that we were the problem and using EDI policies against us, right? And so that's why you're going to have alternative workers' organisations. So I think the Labour Party need to modernise the way they think of workers' rights to incorporate civil liberties.
Can I say one thing very quickly before we go to Simon? So on this, it isn't in Keir's gift just to say, no, I don't want to do any of this. This is something that's been collectively agreed through the federal processes of the Labour Party, which include, surprise, surprise, trade unions, and there's also a massive amount of buy-in. We think we've actually won by-elections in parts of Scotland on the basis of these set of rights that we're putting out there. So I honestly believe that there will be no going back on this particular policy.
There's been an average of 800 jobs created every day since this government took office in 2010. That's been hugely important.
But as a Conservative, you would know that it's employers who create jobs, not governments.
They've been created in this country every day since the government took office, and there's a reason for that. Partly it's down to flexible labour laws. I know lots of people who are on 0 hours contracts. It's particularly helpful for balancing around things like childcare, for people who may have some income from benefits, who want to work to increase their income. It's helpful for people who are balancing all sorts of different family commitments, care commitments, and it's absolutely critical for all kinds of businesses to take care of the fact that both numbers of patients in hospitals and clinics come and go, and if you're a manufacturing business or whatever, you may get orders and you may need to change the operations of your workforce. So I welcome the fact that the Labour Party have U-turned from the initial position of saying there'd be a total ban, but I think those in the Labour Party who are arguing that if there were to be a change of government, they need to back off completely are correct, because the availability of flexible working hours has been absolutely vital, particularly in helping people with parental commitments to help lift those children and those households out of poverty.
Right, I'm going to give you warning of the fun question at the end of the programme, so you can, while the other panellists are speaking on the next question, you can think up your answer. Ashley in Bromsgrove says the City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra has actually encouraged audience members to film concerts on their phones. What's the most annoying audience behaviour that you've witnessed? Now, you'll all have spoken on public platforms, and you must have witnessed something, so you've got a few minutes to think up your answers to that one. But first, Terry wants to know, is the cut to national insurance really going to save Rishi Sunak's career, David Simmonds?
People are certainly noticing it. So we know the impact of the reduction in national insurance, the cumulative impact, is being felt in people's wages. There's been two successive periods now where wage growth has outstripped inflation. All of that means that people genuinely look at their wage packets and feel better off. And as the government has set out, that's part of a direction of travel. As the national finances begin to recover a bit from the enormous £400 billion cost of supporting the economy through COVID, then the enormous multi-billion pound cost of supporting households with energy bills, the key thing now is putting money back in people's pockets. And there's a fairly simple, straightforward choice. We've got local elections tomorrow. I spent 24 years in local elections in London and supporting those elsewhere. City of Birmingham, 21% council tax rise with a Labour council. On average, Conservative councils are cheaper. You're better off. The quality of the services.
Enough of the party political broadcast, but I should tell you that since the budget, I haven't had a single caller ever mention the national insurance cut.
Well, that may be because they're very happy with it. They're out, certainly if I look at my constituents, they're out spending the money in shops, supermarkets. They're out with their family thinking, I've got a few quid, it's time to enjoy it.
All right, Claire.
It's so petty-minded, isn't it? It's like, I'll give them a few pence, they'll be happy.
Well, 900 quid.
No, I know. But the reason why nobody is, as you said, phoning in and saying what a wonderful piece of music is because the depth in which people feel that this is a society that is not dynamic, that the political elite have left them down, is far deeper than a national insurance cut. That's the point I'm making. I think the problems for the Conservative Party are far deeper. I myself do not find the Labour Party an inspiring prospect. I find the Greens even worse, by the way. Look at the shenanigans in bloody Scotland. My God almighty, they're authoritarian, gone mad, that lot. But anyway, I think that what people really want is a sense of forward vision and ambition, and there's just something about this sort of national insurance cut and you all have a bit more money in your pocket. That's not really the same as feeling that you're living in a country that's got a dynamic industrial future, that there's jobs being created everywhere, that there's a real prospects for your family, that there's houses springing up left, right and centre. So I think it's not enough to save Rishi Sunak. What's the point in getting rid of him? I mean, it's just a kind of slow death. I mean, there will be a general election, they'll lose, but the Labour Party are not inspiring people. When I've talked to people, by the way, what the impression that I get, largely people who should be voting Labour, is they might well do it, but my God, with a heavy heart, and not with any kind of sense of enthusiasm.
Just briefly back up what Claire's saying. The most important thing for most people in this country's well-being is their pay packet. And so putting an extra few pounds in people's pockets is far more important to quality of life, to health and well-being, than anything the government would do with that money if they just took it in tax.
Sam, Claire raises a fair point, doesn't she, that compared to 1997, I mean, people are really enthusiastic about Tony Blair. They may think that Keir Starmer is more competent, but he hasn't really shown the road to the sunlit uplands in the way that Blair did.
I think Keir's been honest about how difficult the economic, sort of picture is that we're going to inherit. It isn't 1997. The economy actually isn't booming. My constituents in Ilford, unlike obviously in Ruislip and Pinner, are not running around spending all this extra money. They're actually opening record amounts of food banks every week, because the simple reality is we've had the biggest period of wage, sort of stagnation of wages since Napoleonic times. That is actually the reality that we've got, is that most people in this country are actually worse off. The opportunity to be able to buy or even rent a house at an affordable rate is just not there. The NHS is absolutely on its knees, but we can't get GP appointments. There is a sense of just a slow burning crisis. And Keir Starmer might not be the most exciting man in the world, but he's certainly got a fire extinguisher, and he's going to put out that fire, and he's got a plan to actually get the country off its knees. One of the things we haven't had in this country, and we've just seen some of our best rail manufacturing bodies, like places like Alstom and Hitachi, potentially going to the wall, is no long-term industrial strategy. The strategy of government has been, let the sort of vulture capitalists come in, sell off all the sort of family silver, We're seeing that, the crisis in the water, Thames Water, all the different water companies, where they've been strapped up by hedge funds with billions of pounds of debt, and then actually they're still paying out dividends to their shareholders. Someone needs to get a grip on this stuff, and I tell you, Keir Starmer's going to get a grip on it.
Just to answer quickly, you said, will it save Rishi Sunak? Nothing's going to save Rishi at this point. I don't think it will. I'll leave it there because we're short of time.
We are indeed, and we have to get to our fun question. The City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra has actually encouraged audience members to film concerts on their phones. What's the most annoying audience behaviour that you have witnessed? Claire Fox, you must have experienced a few.
Yeah, I think one of the most annoying things that you could ever say to an audience is, film this on your phone. And it's really Philistine for Birmingham Philharmonic to say, oh, the way you should engage with the music is get your phone out. No, sit quietly and listen. So I think it's insulting to the audience because they'll go, oh, the audience has been really engaged.
It wasn't meant to be a serious answer. It was meant
I know, but it's not funny, is it? Anyway, the thing that really annoys me more than anything else is those audiences who basically storm out, which happens all the bloody time now. The number of times that I speak where somebody says, I find that offensive. And then when you won't shut up...
You wrote a book about it.
And then when you won't shut up, they kind of skulk off and try and close the meeting down. So that's the most annoying habit of the moment, cancel culture.
David?
I had an audience of one, and it was a cameraman who'd come around to film something one Christmas, and he could see, but I couldn't, that one of our kittens was creeping up, looking to pounce on the furry microphone that was prey. And the look of absolute horror and panic that crossed this man's face as I was trying to speak to camera to his producer who was doing the interview was really, really alarming. But it was a great moment.
Ava?
Oh, gosh, as a stand-up comedian, you have so many horrific things that are said to you. It's annoying when people speak in the audience when it's like, honestly, I can hear you. It's annoying when people jump in when you're in the middle of telling a bit and you're trying to get to your punchline. And men are very annoying as well. Like, men will always shout stuff at female comedians, like, show us your boobs. And you're like, why should I be the
Seriously?
All the time. They say something a bit rude, but I changed it to boobs. But you're like sitting there going, why should I be the first woman in your life to ever show you her boobs? Like, leave me alone. So yeah, that kind of thing. With stand-up, you get a lot, especially as a woman, a lot of really weird stuff said to you.
Ever had that, Sam?
I can't say I have, to be totally honest with you. I mean, it's interesting, you speak at all sorts of different events, from picket lines to rallies to kind of speaking in Parliament. And, I think there are two things that I find kind of annoying. And I don't know what the equivalent is in a Conservative Party. In a Labour Party meeting, the sort of person who gets up and makes very kind of like boring but very sort of sternly sort of firstly held points about the rule book and why should we adhere to the rule book. That's something I think, that any Labour Party activist will just sort of like roll their eyes slightly, because there's one in every Labour Party across the country. And perhaps the other thing, I remember speaking at some of these huge rallies when Jeremy Corbyn was leader of the Labour Party with tens of thousands of people, and you'd actually be sort of in full flow, and then people would just start singing, "Oh, Jeremy Corbyn." And it wasn't like it was bad thing, but it was just like, right, I was kind of in full flow there, doing the sort of rabble-rousing, but actually that's just sort of shut me right up.
Well, I was speaking at an event this lunchtime at Henry Jackson Society about the next election, and a lady walked in a bit late, replete with pink hair, which I thought was interesting. No judgments, but she of course was the first to ask a question, and she stood up and asked a question. She said, and by the way, I'm going to be the next leader of the Labour Party. I'm going to be the Labour Party's first woman leader. And of course, everyone was thinking exactly the same thing. Sort of, are you a little bit sort of mad? But we all had to be polite and pretend that we weren't thinking that. It was quite a moment. If you're listening, I did sign your book, and good luck in your quest to be the next leader of the Labour Party. To David Simmonds, Ava Vidal, Sam Tarry and Claire Fox, thank you very much for joining us on the programme tonight. Coming up in the next hour, we're going to turn our attention to the local elections. There are mayoral elections, there are police and crime commissioner elections, all through England and Wales. No elections in Scotland, I don't think, which is probably just as well from the SNP's point of view, let's face it. So I want to ask you tomorrow, if you're intending to vote, and I hope you all are, because turnout in local elections can be a little on the low side. What's going to guide your vote? If you're voting in a local election, do you just vote the same way you always have done? Do you vote tribally? Do you let national issues affect your vote, or do you do what you're supposed to do and vote on local issues? Have you decided to change the way you normally vote? Give me a call and tell me why. 0345 6060 973.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom, a man's been charged with murder after 40